I almost didn't record this. Almost didn't document what happened last night. Some things, some truths. They're too dangerous to share. But I need to finish what I started. Need to warn others, even if it's already too late. I'm not well. Haven't slept in days. The symbols on my skin now cover most of my body. They burn, constantly, like acid etching itself deeper with each passing hour. The whispers never stop, and I'm seeing things that can't possibly be real. Streets that rearrange themselves when I'm not looking. People whose faces shift between one blink and the next. Reality coming apart at the seams. The medication doesn't help anymore. Nothing helps, except the recorder. When I'm using it, when I'm feeding it my thoughts, my memories, the pain subsides, the whispers quiet. A temporary reprieve. The address from the email led me to an abandoned church on the outskirts of the city, St. Ignatius. Closed in the 1970s after a fire that killed 23 parishioners. Left to rot for decades. The perfect meeting place for people like me. People with recorders. People with secrets. I arrived at 7:58 p.m., 2 minutes early. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the night was thick with fog. Unnatural fog that seemed to glow faintly, as if lit from within. The church stood like a wound in the landscape. Blackened stone, shattered windows, a bell tower that leaned at an impossible angle. The recorder was active before I even removed it from my bag. Reels turning faster than I'd ever seen them move. It knew something, sensed something, was excited. Inside, the church was transformed. Hundreds of candles lined the walls, casting flickering shadows across the ruined interior. The pews had been arranged in a perfect circle in the center of the nave, and seated in each pew, 7 people, 7 strangers, each with a recorder identical to mine. I stood in the doorway, uncertain. They turned to look at me in unison. 4 men, 3 women, ages ranging from barely 20 to well into their 70s, different races, different backgrounds, but their eyes, all the same. That hollow, haunted look I now see in the mirror. "You're late," said a woman in her 50s, silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun. "We need to begin before midnight." I took the only empty seat in the circle, placed my recorder on the floor in front of me. All 8 devices now formed their own circle within ours, their reels turning in perfect synchronization. "I'm Catherine," the silver-haired woman said. "I've had my recorder for 27 years. She gestured to her left where a young man with bandaged wrists nodded. "David, 8 months. Around the circle they went. "James, 43 years. "Eliza, 2 years. "Marcus, 15 years. "Sophia, 6 months. "Gabriel, 31 years. Then me. "Alex, 8 days. This revelation caused a stir, whispers between them, glances exchanged. "8 days?" Catherine repeated. "That's unprecedented. The transformation typically takes months, years even." "What transformation?" I asked. Catherine gestured to the symbols on my exposed forearms. "This, the language, the translation. You're progressing faster than any of us did." "Why?" I demanded. "What makes me different?" Catherine studied me for a moment. "What did you do, Alex? What secret are you carrying that makes you such a perfect conduit?" Before I could answer, the recorders began to spin faster. A high-pitched whine filled the air. The candles around us flickered violently. "It's time," Gabriel said, the oldest among them. "Form the link." They each placed one hand on their recorders and extended the other to form a human chain. I hesitated, then did the same, taking Catherine's hand on one side and David's on the other. His bandages were damp against my palm. "What are we doing?" I whispered. "Breaking the cycle," Catherine replied. "Ending it, once and for all." The moment the circle was complete, everything changed. A current seemed to pass through us. Not electricity, but something older, primal. The recorder's reels spun impossibly fast. The air in the center of our circle distorted like heat waves rising from hot pavement. And then the voices started. Not whispers this time, but clear, distinct voices emerging from each recorder. Different languages, different eras, but all speaking in unison, forming a single chant that resonated through the church. The symbols on my skin began to glow. Looking around, I saw the same happening to the others. Their exposed skin illuminated from within, casting eerie light across their faces. "What's happening?" I shouted over the voices. "The final translation," Catherine called back. "With all 8 recorders connected, we can complete the process. We can release what's trapped inside them." "Release it?" Panic gripped me. "The old man in the shop said—" "We know what he told you," Gabriel interrupted. "It was a lie. The same lie he tells all of us, to keep us isolated, to keep us afraid." A wind began to swirl within the church, though all doors and windows were closed. Papers, dust, debris caught in its vortex, spinning around our circle. "The entity in these recorders isn't trying to return," Catherine said. "It's trying to escape. It's been imprisoned for centuries, bound to these machines, forced to consume human suffering to survive." "Who imprisoned it?" I asked. Catherine's expression darkened. "The custodians. The true custodians. The ones who've been guarding the boundaries between worlds since time immemorial. The ones who operate that shop, who distribute these recorders to people like us." The recorder's noise grew unbearable. I felt something warm trickle from my ears. Blood. "Why us?" I shouted. "Why me?" "Because of your guilt," David answered, his voice somehow cutting through the cacophony. "Your shame. Your secret. The energy it produces. The entity feeds on it. Grows stronger." "Jesse," I whispered. My recorder responded immediately to the name, producing a sound so like her voice that tears sprang to my eyes. "Yes," Catherine nodded. "Your guilt over Jesse. My shame over my brother's death. David's failed suicide attempt. We all carry something that marked us as perfect hosts." The church itself began to tremble. Bits of stone and plaster rained down from the ceiling. The voices from the recorders reached a crescendo, the unknown language becoming somehow familiar, comprehensible. "We're releasing it," Gabriel announced, his voice filled with a fervor that bordered on madness. "We're setting it free." A blinding light erupted from the center of our circle. The air split open. There's no other way to describe it. Reality tore like paper, revealing something behind it. Something that shouldn't exist in our world. What emerged wasn't what I expected. Not the shadowy, vaguely humanoid figure I'd seen before. This was beautiful, radiant. A being of pure light, constantly shifting, flowing like liquid gold and silver, intertwined. "You've done it," Catherine breathed, her face illuminated by the entity's glow. "You freed the messenger." The entity spoke, not in words, but in sensations, images, emotions that flooded my mind. Gratitude, relief, and something else. Something that felt like hunger. "Now the offering," Gabriel said, rising to his feet. I tried to break the circle, to pull my hands free, but found I couldn't move. My limbs wouldn't respond. Looking around in panic, I saw the others similarly frozen, expressions of dawning horror on their faces. "What's happening?" Sophia cried, the youngest among us. "This isn't what you said would happen." Catherine's face had drained of color. "Something's wrong. This isn't." Her words cut short as her recorder suddenly levitated, spinning in the air before her. The reels turned backward, faster and faster, until they became a blur. Catherine's body went rigid. Her mouth opened in a silent scream as glowing symbols began to flow from her skin like liquid light, pouring into the recorder. Sound effect, unearthly suction noise. One by one, the same happened to the others. Their recorders rose, spinning in reverse. The symbols, the translated language, extracted from their bodies, absorbed back into the machines. When it came to David, he managed one desperate plea. "Run! It's not what we thought. It's not." His recorder consumed the symbols from his skin, leaving it gray and withered like ancient parchment. His eyes, once vibrant blue, faded to white. The entity at the center of our circle had changed too. Its radiant beauty now seemed mocking, its glow harsh and predatory. It expanded, filling more of the space within the church, tendrils of light reaching toward each of us. My recorder was the last to rise. As it began to spin in reverse, I felt a searing pain as the symbols on my skin liquefied, drawn toward the machine. With every symbol that left me, memories went with it. Fragments of my life, pieces of who I was. And I finally understood. This wasn't a translation. It was a transcription. The entity wasn't trapped in the recorders. It was using them to extract what it needed from us. Human experiences, human emotions, human souls, transforming them into energy, into essence it could consume. With the last of my strength, I broke from the circle, fell to the floor, crawled toward the church doors. Behind me, the others weren't so fortunate. Their bodies remained frozen in place as the entity's tendrils wrapped around them, lifting them from their seats. I didn't look back. Couldn't. The doors seemed miles away, my strength fading with each symbol that left my skin. But something drove me forward. Not just survival instinct, something else. Something... Jessie. Her voice, clearer than ever before. Not coming from the recorder now, but from within me. A memory. A truth I'd buried. "You were never there," I gasped, realization dawning. "That night, the accident, you weren't in the car at all. 7 years ago, the mountain road, the crash. I'd always believed I left Jessie there, fled the scene, let her die alone. It was the guilt I'd carried, the secret that made me a perfect target for the recorder. But it was a false memory, implanted, by the recorder, by the entity." I made it outside just as the church erupted with light, so bright it turned night to day for one blinding moment, then darkness, complete, absolute, followed by silence so profound it felt like another presence. I don't know how long I lay there in the mud. Minutes, hours. Eventually, sirens pierced the night. Emergency vehicles, police, fire trucks, reports of a disturbance at the abandoned church, strange lights. I was barely conscious when they found me, barely able to speak. But I warned them, begged them not to go inside, not to touch the recorders. They didn't listen. I woke up here, hospital, restraints on my wrists and ankles. A psychiatrist who nods sympathetically as I try to explain what happened, who makes notes about shared psychotic disorder and mass hallucination. But I know what I saw, know what happened in that church, and I know it's not over. The phone in my room rang an hour ago. No one on the other end at first. Then a voice I recognized, the old man from the shop. "You survived," he said, sounding both impressed and troubled. "Only one other has ever done that, in 1983. "Thomas Warren," I replied. "Yes. He thought he could break the cycle too. Gathered 7 others, attempted the same ritual." "What happened to them?" A pause. "The same thing that happened to your group. The entity fed, grew stronger, transitioned. Transitioned from recording to broadcasting." As he spoke, I noticed something. My recorder, which the police had found beside me, which they'd placed with my personal effects, was changing. Its reels melted, reformed, the entire device reshaping itself before my eyes, becoming something else, something more modern. "What's happening?" I demanded. "Evolution," the old man answered. "Adaptation. With each cycle it changes, updates itself, finds new ways to spread." The recorder had transformed completely now, into a smartphone, sleek, black, identical to my own, which had been destroyed in the church. "This is where I leave you," the old man said. "My role in this particular cycle is complete. You're the custodian now, the true custodian." The call ended. The new device, no longer a recorder but something far more dangerous, lit up with notifications. Downloads completing, apps installing themselves. A blank screen replaced by a familiar logo, a social media platform, one used by billions. The display shows thousands of messages already spreading. Voice notes, audio clips, each containing fragments of what was extracted in that church. The entity's essence, the translated language, now encoded in digital form, spreading exponentially, device to device, person to person. I try to warn the nurses, the doctors, but the restraints hold me back. The sedatives keep me weak, and they don't understand. Can't understand. Not until they hear it themselves. Not until they receive the message that's already spreading across the world. Something's happening outside. Commotion in the hallways, screams, the building shaking. I can see through my window, the city skyline in the distance, strange lights pulsating above it. The sky itself seeming to tear open, just like the air in that church. A nurse just entered my room, eyes wide with panic. Phone in hand, screen glowing with that same app, those same notifications. "What's happening?" she asks me, terrified. "What is this?" I can only tell her the truth. The same truth I'm telling you now. The transition, I say. The entity is no longer contained in 8 recorders. It's free. It's everywhere. It's in every device that can record and transmit sound. "How do we stop it?" she asks. I look at her phone, at the millions of audio messages now spreading across the globe, at the symbols beginning to appear on her skin as she listens to them. "We can't," I tell her. "It's too late. The circle is complete. The hospital is collapsing around us now, the world outside transforming, the entity, now free, now powered by the collective guilt and shame and fear of everyone connected to the digital network, is reshaping reality itself. This will be my final recording, my final warning, though I know it's too late. I know most of you listening have already received those audio messages, already felt the symbols appearing on your skin, already begun your own translations. If by some miracle you haven't, if you've somehow remained disconnected, stay that way. Destroy your devices, cut yourself off, run. But I suspect it's already too late. I suspect transmission complete, translation complete, transition complete. Thank you for your participation. We are coming. We are already here.